This is the Ramana Maharshi 40 Verses on Reality Satsang, a time for self-reflection and self-inquiry. Know yourself and be always free and at peace. I'm Richard Clarke, hosting this satsang. Welcome. I'm a seeker like you, sharing what we love. I've been blessed with years of deep teaching and practice. I bring this to this satsang. Now, this week's reading from 40 Verses on Reality is verse 20. These are Ramana's words. He who sees God without seeing the self sees only a mental image. They say that he who sees the self sees God. He who, having completely lost the ego, sees the self has found God, because the self does not exist apart from God. Only the self can see the self. No other exists to see anything. Ignorance does not exist. It has no reality. Yourself is one. There is no separation, no other. There is no other self anywhere at any time. There is not yourself and the self of God. There is only the self, and you are that. The idea of yourself as an individual is all a mental construction and part of the controlled hallucination that usually makes up our day-to-day life. The brain assembles sensory inputs and creates a virtual reality right within your skull. The seeming reality takes your sense inputs, modified by all your conditioning and tendencies and mental habits, and turns this conglomeration into your mental reality, what you seem to perceive as the world, what you project as the world. This is all based on the assumption that you are a separate individual. Ramana instructs us to challenge this assumption, and by this challenge, discover the vast, unlimited reality that we are. This virtual reality, this unreality, is created by the mind. It is what is known as ignorance. Ramana tells us to look beyond the mind into what gives the mind the light of consciousness that is, in reality, the only knower and is who we are. The mind cannot know this deeper knower, since it is what provides the knowing power that is used by the mind. Can a light shine upon itself? Does the sun illuminate itself? The mind knows only its own creation, not the light that illuminates it. So, to see God, You do not need to look far, only look deeply within yourself to see God, know yourself. Now, on to the videos for this week. The first is from Swami Sarvapriyananda, and he tells us to remain aware of our own nature.
How can my mind always be tagged to this pure consciousness in all my work and actions?
I think it's not just Pradeep in India, but a lot of people across the world. When they listen to non-duality first, they begin to understand, and then this question, inevitably it will come up at one point or the other. I see, yes, such a thing is there. It's like a serene, changeless being, consciousness. Very nice. But I don't seem to be somehow in that frame of mind when I'm driving, walking, talking, acting in the world. I'm mixed up. And that background reality is so nice. How can I be there all the time? There's a verse in the Mandukya, the second chapter, a very beautiful verse. The last verse of the second chapter of Mandukya Karika. Tattvam adhyatmikam drishtva, tattvam drishtva tu bahyata, tattvi bhuta stada rama, tattvada pratyuto bhavet. Very beautiful. You know what it says? It's an answer to this question. Seeing that reality, Brahman, within, and seeing that reality outside. You become that reality, you are that reality. And you find bliss and peace and completeness in that reality. And never slip away from that reality. The last quarter. Tattvad apratyuto bhavet. What do you become? You become that which can never slip away from that reality. I have a feeling the questioner would say, yes, that's what I want. Advaita Vedanta says that's what you already have. You've always had it. You suffer under this notion that I have slipped away from it. Even when you think that you have slipped away from it, you have not. Let's see how I can put it. There are many beautiful ways to put it. First of all, notice this one. I am that reality. It's not that reality, it's not Brahman, it's not Atman. We use all those terms, but those terms can be distancing sometimes. Yes, my Brahman is fine, but I have a problem. Atman is fine, my Atman is fine, like my liver is doing well. But I have a problem. Atman is you. It's literally you, your essence. Yeah, even if I say your essence, you say, yeah, Swami, my essence is fine, but I have a lot of problems in my job, in my family, in the day-to-day world. You are that reality. Let's talk about that openly. Instead of distancing it away as Brahman, Atman, or even the word Tattvam. Tattvam literally means an impersonal truth. So I am that. How can you ever be distanced from yourself? How can you ever slip away from yourself? What you can have, the objection might be, but I feel it. I get disturbed, I get angry, I get unhappy. Yes, that wrong notion can be there. That somehow there was a serenity and I've lost it. It was a serenity in the mind, and the mind has lost that serenity. You are the one which experienced the serene mind. You are the same one which has experienced the disturbing mind, the disturbed mind. The calm, relaxed, spacious, luminous mind and the agitated, turbulent mind. You are the same one. Whether it's a waveless, vast expanse or a turbulent ocean with waves and storms, It's the same water, literally the same water without any change at all. Even the ocean example is a little misleading, because you will say, no, Swami, but something is happening to that water. There's a lot of ups and downs. And yes, but the water nature is unchanged. Water has not become not water when it is in the middle of a storm. In the same way, whether you are in the depths of meditation, absolutely calm, quiet, the world forgotten, still, peaceful, or engaged in frantic action, in a high-pressure job, you are exactly the same unchanging awareness. It may not seem to be that, but you are that. Let me see how I can put it. The space example. So Mandukya uses a space example. Suppose you have different pots. And now the space, which seems vast and unlimited, seems to be cut up into different pots. The space inside the pot, in Sanskrit, Ghatakasha. And the space outside the pot, called Mahakasha. But literally, let me ask you, is the space actually cut off by the pot? The space which was here in Manhattan a few hundred years ago. Now we have so many densely packed buildings. Has the space been cut off? It's amazing. Yeah, it looks like that. Let me ask you an even simpler question. If you have a glass of water, half full, half empty. There's water and there is, it's filled with air, but let's forget the air part of it. There's space there, which there's no water in and there's space in where there's water also, but anyway, just empty space. Let's forget the air for the moment. Now when I move the glass from here to there, will the water inside move or not with the glass? Yes. All of you don't seem to be sure. This part you should be sure of, because the next part is more confusing. Yes, the water does move. Otherwise, it would make a very wet mess here. If I moved the glass and the water would splash down here. Swami, you forgot to take the water along with the glass. No, that doesn't happen. When you move the glass, the water moves with it. Now let me ask you, does the space move with it? When the glass is moving like this, the space circumscribed by the glass, that space inside, is it moving along with the glass? Is the space moving along with the glass? No. Tell me, does space move along with the container, the glass, or the glass is moving through space? Glass is moving through space. Yeah. When you cut up Manhattan into so many buildings, you have not enclosed space. Space has graciously permitted the buildings to exist within itself. Now, what can happen is, in one pot, there may be smoke and soot. Maybe you lit a fire or something. In one pot, there may be holy Ganga water. In one pot, they may have dirty water. In one pot, there may be milk. Is the space polluted by the smoke in that pot? Is the space purified by the holy water of the Ganga river in that pot? No. The pot might be affected. The pot gets affected. But space does not get affected at all. I noticed in India, when a person dies and the body is burnt, the wood is burnt to ashes, and the water, there's a lot of water in the body. It vaporizes, and the air around it becomes very hot because the fire is burning. But the space, is it affected right there when the body is burning fiercely? The space is not affected. It's the air which becomes hot. It's the wood which becomes burnt into ashes. It's the water which is vaporized. Look at the four elements. They are affected. Earth, fire, water, air. Space, not affected. Similarly, whatever the contents in the mind, whatever the actions of the body, you, the pure consciousness, you are exactly always the same. You have not departed from your real nature as pure consciousness. How can I remain connected with that? what he is asking, I know, because it's something that we also ask. I remember, I told you earlier, once I was sitting with a monk in Haridwar, and one young monk was discussing non-dualism very earnestly with the teacher, with the Swami, old Swami. And finally he said excitedly exactly this question, but Swami, we must at least hold on to that idea that I am Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi, yeh chinta to karni chahiye. This much I must hold on to. And the Swami said, this is exactly what you must not hold on to. Because somehow I think I am Sarvapriyananda. It's like saying I must hold on to it. I must keep saying in the background, I am Sarvapriyananda, I am Sarvapriyananda. Otherwise I might forget. Who am I? Swami, you always ask, who am I? No, I never forget that. The difference between an actor who is acting as Hamlet or somebody in the open air Shakespeare there in Central Park in summer, that actor must always remember that I am Hamlet. Must keep in mind consciously. But suppose the actor's name is Mr. Scott. Does he have to keep remembering, I'm Scott, I'm Scott, I'm Scott? I must keep it in mind, otherwise I'll become Hamlet. No. Doesn't have to remember. In fact, to be a good actor, must not even think about it. Must try to be Hamlet with all intensity. Similarly, the reality which we are, you don't have to keep thinking about it, otherwise I might forget. That happens at the beginning. Because once we get an intuition of what is possible, what we really are, we want to be centered in that. And that's why this question comes, give me some technique so that I noticed what you're talking about. It's remarkable. And let me always remain like that. What Advaita says is, you always are like that. All right, one more point and then we'll go on. Very important here. It is what actually a non-dualist teacher would say to this question. The difference between memory and experience. In Sanskrit, smriti and anubhava. The two are not the same, they do not go together. When you remember something, you are not experiencing it. When you are experiencing something, you are not remembering it, or you need not remember it. All right? Now I'm showing you a clock. Look at the clock. Will you say I'm seeing a clock or I'm remembering a clock? Seeing. All right. Now close your eyes and visualize the clock. Will you say I'm seeing the clock or I'm remembering the clock? Remembering. Okay, you can open your eyes. This is the difference between anubhava, experience, and smriti. Advaita is experience. It's not a memory. It's not something I experienced earlier and then I'm trying to remember it now. The question is, how can I always remember I'm Brahman? No, don't remember you're Brahman, because you're always Brahman. It's always shining forth. It's just somehow we think it's not present to us. We think it seems to be hidden. That's why we think that we have to remember it all the time. If you are looking at me, you say, Swami, I'm seeing you. Yes, you're seeing me, but are you remembering me? Swami, I'm seeing you. Why do I have to remember you? When I don't see you, I might remember you. This is the difference between memory and experience. Non-dualism is based on an ever-present experience. It's blazing forth all the time. In fact, it's the only thing that's blazing forth all the time. And we have to recognize it. We don't recognize it. You might ask, all right, so how do I recognize it all the time? You don't have to recognize it all the time also. Once you recognize it, it's done. Only thing is, you are right. There might be a period in our spiritual practice when you need to dwell on it intensively for some period of time. But remember, that's also practice. That's not enlightenment. It's remembering an ever-present object. If you are trying to remember the clock when I'm showing it to you, you're doing something odd indeed.
All right, and now we have my teacher, Nome, talking about the one self.
If you know yourself as you truly are, then your very being constitutes the knowledge. If, apparently, you do not know yourself in absolute truth, then what you do not know is not really yourself. And the one who does not know is also not yourself. Indeed, in self-knowledge, you find the one who would not know. The root of ignorance is non-existent. The discovery of this non-existence, or dissolution of ego, signifies self-knowledge. What is it that you truly are? As long as one assumes an embodied individual existence, the self, or Brahman, the vast absolute, which is non-objective, will seem as if an objective goal removed from oneself. If, making your vision non-objective, you inquire deeply within yourself to know who you are, then, having abandoned the objective outlook, you find that the individual entity who had the objective outlook, who could be in ignorance, who is the cause of ignorance, who actually composes ignorance, is but a false assumption, the stuff of imagination. The entire samsara, repetitive cycle of birth, death, and illusion, pivots on the idea of existing as an individual entity, an I. No one has ever seen this I. For the real self, there is just vast, formless being consciousness bliss, its own nature, and not a trace of I. The eyeless reality is the significance of silence. The illusory ego I has not seen itself either, for it has no seeing power. It is an inert illusion, an insubstantial bit of nothingness. The Maharshi has said that to say I have realized or I know the self and I have not realized or I don't know the self are both matters for laughter. They are absurd statements. The self is not something objective to be known or unknown. Your being cannot become an object, conceived or perceived. And if a searching inquiry be made as to who is it that knows, who is it that does not know, there is found to be no one answering to the name of I. Inquire within yourself, taking your own sense of immutable existence as the basis of the inquiry. Trace out your own existence and know what is there. It is not the body. It is not any of the thoughts constituting the mind. What is it that is assumed to be an I, but which is actually existing all the time? What is it that it is assumed to become embodied, to have birth and death, but which is itself actually unborn, imperishable, and formless and unembodied? What is it that seems to be at the center of all thoughts, yet itself actually is never conceived, the unknown knower of all that is known, as the Upanishad says? What is it that you truly are? If just this much is realized, Brahman knows Brahman. Reality comprehends itself with a knowledge that is eternal, not a knowledge divided into knower, knowing, and known, but non-dual knowledge, in which being and knowledge are identical. Being is not an object, and it is not an activity. Likewise, knowledge is not something gained or lost. In the inquiry to know yourself, the dissolution of the inquirer, or the penetration into the nature of the inquirer, is what is essential. The dissolution of his individuality, what seems to mark him off as a separate being, the abandonment of such false definition, is the progress so-called. Actually, one is traveling no distance whatsoever. It is more like dreaming you were one thing and waking up to find that you were not that thing at all, that you were dreaming. If this happens, is there any transformation? Yet the old delusion is gone. Misidentification constituted the delusion. And delusion alone was the cause of any of the bondage or suffering experienced in that dream. To be free of suffering, to liberate yourself from the imagined bondage, be rid of delusion. Delusion is just confusion regarding your own nature, taking yourself to be something that you are not. Inquiry resolves the delusion and reveals a knowledge that is innate. In the earnest attempt to realize this knowledge, approached by dissolution of what you assume yourself to be. If all that is falsely supposed is abandoned, then without anything more whatsoever, the remainder is the truth itself, the Supreme Self itself, happy and at peace in its own nature always. Suppose yourself to be the ego, and the self will seem to be elusive. inquire and find the non-existence of that I? And you yourself are what you have found. Falsely assume yourself to be the body, and realization will seem exceedingly difficult. God or the Absolute will seem to be something other. Abandon the misidentification with the body. Then where are you? Where is God? If identified with the body, you will look for the self as something sensed, or as a sensing entity. Be free of such confusion. If identified with the mind, you will look for the self or realization, or reality, in the form of some mental mode or mental state. Your real nature, what is to be realized, is free of any mental mode, free of any mental state, whether it be waking, dreaming, deep dreamless sleep, or any mode occurring within those states. You are not a state of mind. The realization is likewise. You are not a condition of the body. The realization is likewise. Free of the body, free of the mind. Non-objective, unchanging. This space-like, very real remainder, which alone has been existing always, is the truth of your being. Know it experientially, firsthand for yourself. It is natural by the dissolution of the one who supposedly does not know.
All right. Now we will go to a place of meditation and inquiry. Breathe in and breathe out. Long, slow breaths. Feel the breath come in. Feel it as it goes out. And notice that you exist. You exist, and you know that you exist. Now investigate within yourself. Are there two selves? One to know and the other to be known? When you inquire into existence, what is your sense of being? Are you many or just one without even the idea of one? Who am I? What is the nature of my existence? All right, let's close with a chant. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om. Peace, peace, peace. Thank you for watching this today. This series on Ramana's 40 verses on reality will continue in the following weeks. If this was of interest to you, I have more, a free book site, a YouTube site, and my blog. The URLs will be on screen next. Namaste.